we approve special exception 04-2012.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Taylor, seconded by Mr. Black, that we approve special exception 04-2012. Is there discussion on the motion? Further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, is that subject to the conditions as amended this evening by the board?
Yes.
Subject to the
No
condition.
more than 3 employees.
No more than 5. We can't go less than change the ordinance. It's in the ordinance.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
But that's in the ordinance. It says no more than 5.
What change are you referencing, Mr. Fincher?
He was saying 3.
The number of
Employees?
non-family employees on site.
It's in the ordinance.
Okay.
Accept that?
I accept that.
Five's
sir.
in the ordinance. Okay.
All right. Further discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. And the motion is carried. Unfinished business. Request from Department of Game and Inland Fisheries to use county property on the Mackinac River for canoe and boat landing.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Larry Hart from the Department of Games and Inland Fisheries is present this evening. You have all the letters that were previously gathered by Mr. Hart in response to his, the board requested he sent a letter to abutting property owners, which he did. You have previously received those comments. You've also heard public comment related to this issue. The board had raised several questions at its previous meeting, and Mr. Hart is present tonight to address any of the questions that the board may still have related to this application.
Okay. Board have any questions of Mr. Hart?
I do. Mr. Hart? I wish I could say there was something worthwhile, but come on down, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Good to see you here again. Mr. Hart, I don't know if you were here during, am I loud enough? I mean, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, because that's usually rare that people can't hear me. Mr. Brooks made a comment during his public comments that said the property owners own to the middle of the river, and the river actually belongs to the Commonwealth. Would you concur with that statement?
We checked with the Code of Virginia on that, and the Code of Virginia is 28.2-1200, about 4 lines long. I'll just read that to you. All of the beds of the bays, rivers, creeks, and the shores of the sea within the jurisdiction of the Commonwealth, not conveyed by special grant or compact according to law, shall remain the property of the Commonwealth and may be used as a common by all the people of the Commonwealth for the purpose of fishing, fowling, hunting, and taking and catching oysters and other shellfish. Then we specifically contacted the Marine Resources Commission with this question: who owns the river bottom, especially in a situation where a person gets out of his boat and is actually standing on the river bottom? And this is a response, again, just a few lines long. To answer your question, and this is from the Marine Resources Commission, to answer your question, the Commonwealth owns the river bottom unless there is a King's grant that grants the ownership of the river bottom to someone else. The bottom belongs to the Commonwealth and is subject to the jurisdiction of the Marine Resources Commission. Thus, if the Mattaponi Wildlife Management Area proposes to construct any structure for canoe kayak access that will encroach channelward of the mean low water or ordinary high water if it's non-tidal, then they must receive a permit from our agency. This would require the completion and submission of a joint permit application. That's as much information as I have on that, sir.
Okay, and I was trying to listen carefully. And the one thing you said was there needed to be a King's grant, which means that would have been something that was recorded before 1770 something, right?
I can't address about what constitutes a King's grant.
Okay.
Mr. Thomas, there was a dispute over who owns the Mattaponi River bottom 15 years or more ago between King and Queen and King William counties because of the reservoir that was proposed by Newport News. I don't know that it was ever settled. The dispute arose because one county or the other was claiming a grant not only to the center of the river bottom but to the other side. I believe it might have been King William, since they were getting the entire benefit of the money from Newport News as opposed to so long ago, I can't remember the outcome. But it's far from clear who owns the bottom of the Mattaponi River, I believe.
Well, part of that, and thank you, Mr. Emerson, part of that, Mr. Hart, is where I was trying to go is that, you know, if the water belongs to the Commonwealth, theoretically you have the right to use the water to canoe. There are times when the rivers are lower than normal. So on those times when they're lower than normal, or there's a time when it's blocked, there may be trees down. If I get out of my canoe, which is very hypothetical because I'm not going to be in the canoe, but if I got out of my canoe, am I trespassing when I try to clear the river? Am I trespassing when I can't get down the river because there's a blockage and I carry my canoe around it? So, I mean, can you help me out on those scenarios?
I can't help you beyond what the information we got from the Marine Resources Commission, and they said that the Commonwealth owns that river bottom unless there is a special King's grant, and that's been an issue in the Commonwealth of Virginia for many years.
Let me ask you this, because it doesn't. It seems like what I'm asking is kind of specific. So if you'll follow me, total hypothetical again. Okay. All right, you own land on the river. Okay, I am canoeing down the river. The river's a little low, the river's blocked. I get out of my canoe and I walk around your property. What's your feeling?
If you walk around on my property
with my canoe, I've
with your
seen
canoe,
it done on TV.
that'd
so
be considered a portage,
Mm-hmm.
and if you go anywhere above the mean high water, then you would be on property of another.
I'd be trespassing.
If it's posted.
If it's posted.
Mm-hmm. You're trespassing.
Okay, the county attorney believes it's trespassing regardless, but okay, but
If you're on another individual's real estate, real property without their consent and approval, you're trespassing.
so my one thing, I'd like to do the boat ramp if it's nice for people to go up and down the river, but I'd like to not do the boat ramp if there are issues with private property and what are you going to do when you come around my property?
Right.
Because, I mean, that's the decision-making we have here. It's a good idea, but I also have to respect the property rights of owners. I think Mr. Brooks was telling Mr. Seeley earlier that he has trees down on his property. So you can't get your canoe past his property. What do we do in that? Do we call the sheriff? Does the Commonwealth do anything since you own the water? Doesn't the Commonwealth come out and clear the water?
Our agency does not clear the water, I can tell you that. There are some provisions where if it's an impediment to navigation, the Marine Resources Commission has some responsibilities. I don't know how far they extend. If your question is related to how we enforce the laws, I have with me tonight Sergeant Ryan Schuler. He's a conservation police officer with the Department of Game and Fisheries. Just letting you know he is here as a resource if you have a question in that regard.
You want to bring him up now?
Okay.
But he's not really going to be patrolling the Mattaponi. That's going to be the sheriff's office, right?
No, sir. We would be patrolling the.
You're going to do it
Yes, sir.
on a regular basis?
I can't say on a regular basis, but we would be patrolling the Mattaponi.
Okay. So what happens in the scenario where there's trees down in the river?
That's an interpretation question, in my opinion. I think the attorney could answer that better than I could.
No, let's hear from you. I hear from him all the time.
Well,
Let's hear from
actually,
you.
I'd have to reference my code book.
What do you think?
Something is telling me there is an exception for portaging and obstruction on a waterway. If you merely portage the obstruction and re-enter the water, again, I would like to reference my code before
I'm not going to hold you to it. I just want to
Okay,
know what you
but
think.
This is an issue we've had in the past with portaging. And based on my experience, I believe there was some conversation about there being an exception in the law or some case law referring to portaging of an obstruction in the waterway.
Okay. Now,
Because this is a common, I mean, we have streams and rivers throughout the Commonwealth, and we have a lot of access points all over the Commonwealth. So this would not be something unique to Caroline County.
Okay. And I'm sure that's the case. Now, Mr. Brooks has complained to you about me walking on his land with my canoe because there's a tree there. You're tired of the complaints? Are you going to get the tree out, or do you clear the waterway? Who clears the waterway?
As a law enforcement officer, sir, we do not clear the waterway, no, sir.
But you report to somebody who would, or you just say, oh, yeah, that's too bad? Or shucks, I think was the phrase we used before.
I'm not sure what exactly I would say, but I'm not going to, I don't have any type of procedure that I'm going to report to some government agency and say, there's a tree down on the Mackinac River and it needs to be removed. I do believe that Mr. Harder has some photographs of a trip that he took that shows that this stretch of river was open
Navigable.
for almost the entire way.
Okay. I'm going to take a break, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Other questions? Mr. Black?
Yes. Is this considered a navigable river? Is it titled as a navigable river? Because I looked up something the last couple of days. It's called something under the National River Law, and I was wondering if, and it depends on if it's titled a navigable river or not.
The Mackinac River is declared navigable, I think, by the Rivers and Harbors Act up to in the vicinity of the bridge at Milford. Then there was an act in the General Assembly back in the 1850s that identified about the same location.
Okay, because it states in here, according to this, the U.S. Supreme Court has something called the Equal Footing Doctrine, and it states that states own the rivers up to the ordinary high water mark. Where river banks are fairly flat, this mark can be quite a distance from the edge of the water during medium water flows. So, if I've got a low water flow in my canoe, and I'm below the high water mark, I'm technically not trespassing, correct?
It depends whether the person has a King's Grant and can defend that.
So,
But we don't know what a King's Grant is, though.
right.
Yeah, we
you
do.
do.
We do know what a King's Grant is. We just don't know what properties might be. If you searched their title, how far back it would go, and would it come back to a King's Grant in the 1600s, where property was granted by the king, by the monarchy, before the Revolutionary War, to some individual or individuals or a company that then sold it to someone else or conveyed it to someone else and conveyed it back down. You can trace things back to King's Grants in some instances. Whether or not any of these properties can do that or not, I would have no idea, though.
Mr. Chairman, can I go on? I was just looking at some of the, all I did was Google, basically, ownership of rivers, and I got the National River Law here, and that's why I'm just quoting this, so I don't know unless Virginia is something different. It says here, rivers cannot be closed or partially closed to appease adjacent landowners, or to appease people who want to dedicate the river to fishing only to make life easier for local law enforcement agencies. And that's quoting this Section 8 right here. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, or this is incredible.
I'm not familiar with what you're referencing.
Okay.
Okay, I've got two references to help answer the question about is it navigable. The first one is a requirement for landowners to remove obstructions after restoral of navigability, and that was by the back in 1784. So there was a requirement there. Probably the one reference that has the most impact here is the Navigable Waters of the United States, Section 10 of the Rivers and Harbors Act. And it tells us that the Mackinac River is navigable from the confluence with the York River to Guinea Bridge, and the nearest existing landmark is the Route 722 Bridge at Milford.
Other questions? Mr. Taylor? Mr. Underwood?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Seeley?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. And I guess I'm going to go to, again, I have floated that piece of water from 605 to Route 207 many times. And in July, there are enough trees in the water. In some place, you had to walk almost 2/10 of a mile dragging whatever you're in around all of that was there. So I really challenge anybody that said they actually kayaked from 207 all the way up to the property that you own, because I know from someplace in John Ames's property up that we pulled the boat many, many, many times. There's a high bank on one side, and it's low and flat on the other side, which is the John Ames side of the river. So being able to actually boat that would be near impossible. So, and I find it interesting that you would be able to, that there would be safe portage around all of those places, because then, and I have to ask our attorney, what is the personal property rights if you can portage around every piece of land, every tree or obstruction in the river? I mean, I'd like to see where that actually is stated before we.
I don't have any knowledge of that. It could very well be the case, but I personally have not run into it. We can try and find it. I mean, we can look in the code and we can look in case law and see if there's any Virginia case law or a statute that provides an exception for portaging so that it's not trespassing.
Because I can tell you that posted signs will go up every 10 feet along all of this, and there will be people waiting for somebody to actually portage around. And the sheriff's office will be, on call nonstop for this to happen. And there are places in there that are really tangled. I mean, I portaged around it, shouldn't have, took my chances. And I just have real concerns when we start down that path.
Okay. Mr. Hart, this is the bottom of this issue is the Commonwealth's going to give us some land. It's going to build the boat ramp, right?
Well, no, the question is, will the county make the property available that it has
for you to build a boat
Milford
ramp?
For us to build the boat landing on it?
Now, and that's the real issue is is the Commonwealth eventually going to build a boat ramp? What if, because I'm looking at this as a decision that is reversible. You know, if we say, yes, go ahead, build the boat ramp, it's a good idea to let people float down the river, but it turns out to be a problem, we could reverse that decision some sort of way.
Our land control document, if we're going to make an investment of our money and our resources on the property, we will ask for a 20-year agreement that will allow us to be there and operate it for a period of 20 years. That should be the life of the project.
So you're saying 20 years? Okay. So I don't have any other way to get out of that decision for 20 years?
It would be by the terms of the agreement, whatever agreement that we would reach with the county. If there's provisions in there for ways to end it, that could be made part of the agreement.
So we could theoretically put in the agreement if there were certain issues that, property rights problems, whatever.
Yeah, we would if we entered into that type of agreement, we'd have some expectation that we'd be reimbursed for our, some part of our investment should we be unable to continue operating it for the public use.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Mr. Taylor?
We've talked about the different times of the year when the river is, at its shallow part and this approaching might be necessary. Are there times of the year when this perhaps is not even going to be a problem? And if so, how many months of the year are we talking where we may not even have this problem, I guess is the question I have.
Some of the folks that have floated this, different times of year may have better information. I've been here in the month of May, I believe it's May have been April, but in spring months. I came back in the month of June. In May, I had no issues to speak of. In the month of June, I put in at the Page Road Bridge and went down to the lower end of the wildlife management area to see if I could paddle back okay. I got down okay. When I came back, running against the current, I did have to get out in one place, pull my boat over a log, and then, so I had one location I did have to get out in June.
And I guess my concern is, number one, the state's paying for it. We're never going to get an opportunity to do this again. And if there's some way that we can work it out such that citizens would be able to use it, or have better access to it, I certainly would like to see us do that. Now, if we're talking about just a brief period of time, maybe when we're low on rain or whatever, or the river's headed the shallow part, you know, then it might be worth it to try and figure some way to get around that. But I just hate to see us pass up this opportunity to do that boat ramp, because if we do now, we won't ever get that opportunity again. Or unless the county ends up paying for it, and I don't think we're going to see that. So.
You did, Mr. Hart, you did say last time that the Commonwealth was willing to restrict the time the boat ramp was used?
No, I haven't said that. There was a request. It was in one of the letters where someone suggested that, but I have not responded to that. And I would not recommend that we have a time of year closure on it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
If the county did not own this property and the state owned this property, would we be having this discussion tonight?
No.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So it's not a matter of whether, you know, if the state owned the property, it wouldn't be a question as to whether people had to get up and go around and get out of the canoes and step on the bottom of the river, regardless of who owned it. They would do it.
Would you like to buy the property?
And so the question is, we own the property, and the question is, are we going to allow the state to invest money to provide the citizens of Caroline County, as well as others, but certainly I'm worried about the citizens of Caroline County, an opportunity to enjoy natural resource that we have here in the county that they're not able to enjoy at this point in time. All right, how did the board want to handle this issue? Is there a motion to approve or a motion to deny?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the request to, where is it? For the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries to use the county on the Mackinac River for canoeing and boat landing.
I second the motion.
Motion made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Taylor. Discussion on the motion.
Discussion. I just wonder, who's going to make the, or who's going to negotiate the contract with the Commonwealth?
Well, I'm sure the county administrator is going to start the process, and then
Well, I just need to know how the whole process goes before we vote on it. That's okay. That's okay. County administrator, and then that'll be approved by the board?
Sure, all contracts are.
Okay. Thank you.
All contracts are approved by the board. All right, further discussion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion's approved. I think it's the division of the House. Mr. Black, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Mr. Underwood?
Aye.
Mr. Seeley?
Nay.
Mr. Thomas?
I wasn't ready, nay.
And I vote aye as well. So the motion is approved, and we hope to get started soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you again, Mr. Hart.
That was good.
Thank you.
Informational and calendar items.
Yeah. We're done?
Nope. Informational calendar items.
Oh, we're done.
Just wanted to point out, we put in your packet,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's fine. We want to remind you, on the 23rd, we have the RACSB legislative get-together at their building right out on 207. We'd already pointed out a couple of other things. We do have our work session at 6 p.m. on the radio system in one of the EOC rooms on the 7th of November. And I received a letter from Caroline Pines Property Owner Association. Their president, a thank you letter I laid at your place today for the water system, and they talked about how happy they are and how good the water is. So. Oh, I was just going to read it. I just have one, sorry.
Oh, okay.
No wonder you didn't see it. We put too many other things out.
We're all looking.
But I'll make sure you get a copy of it. It's very nice.
Okay.
Very nice letter from those folks with how positive it turned out.
Okay. What else?
Do you want to bring it up tonight? You're talking about somebody calling.
Yeah, I'll do the board comments. All right. I believe there's a motion that needs to be made as a result of the closed meeting.
Correct, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose that we, let me see, accept the recommendations of Chief Loftus that we discussed in closed session.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Motion made by Mr. Underwood, seconded by Mr. Taylor, that we approve the recommendation of Chief Loftus and during discussion in the closed session. Further discussion on the motion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. And the motion is carried. Closing comments. Mr. Black?
None.
Mr. Taylor?
I have none.
Mr. Underwood?
Mr. Chairman, I just had one. It was indeed a pleasure to discuss and debate the issue regarding the fireworks issue in Mr. Taylor's district. I only wish all applicants could come and answer as many questions as Mr. Walter did when they come before this board. Thank you.
Mr. Seeley?
I have none.
Mr. Thomas?
I have one I forgot to neglect. I neglected to mention a thank you to Mr. Fincham and all his work on property maintenance. Sheriff Moore called the county office to say...
Sheriff Moore?
Sheriff Moore.
Okay. Not the current sheriff.
Former Sheriff Moore called to compliment the county on the work it did in cleaning up the house right behind here. So I do appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I had a call Sunday from a person down in the lower part of the county, down in probably in your district, Jeff. And what he was recommending is that the county have a roundtable type of discussion among citizens, different people from different areas of the county, and talk in terms of the budgeting and all of those other things that go on in the county. His particular comments had to do with AP Hill. I think it may be a good idea for us to open up a dialogue with citizens of this county by roundtable. We did it with businesses at one time. If you recall, the ones that have been on the board for a while, we had roundtables, I think every quarter or something with business owners and leaders. I think it's a good idea if we do it with citizens as well. And since we're starting into the budgeting process and other issues, so if the board does not have any objection, then I'm going to ask Mr. Cully to put together a roundtable type of discussion among the residents of the county, and maybe every couple of months, every 3 months, we meet and talk about issues that they have.
How will you pick the residents?
And I think that, people that have had a concern in the past, we start with that process, and then we advertise in the paper that people that would like to come and be part of the roundtable discussion. Hearing no,
That can be,
Okay.
that can get ugly, but
I understand it can have its downfall, but I also know that I think that we need to hear what people have to say about the various issues that are being they're coming before this board. I mean, they're getting more, they're getting larger, they're getting more difficult. So I think we need to hear what the people have to say as well. Let us try it. Let's see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, we stop the process. Mr. Steele, Mr. Pellet, you have direction of the board, I think. Okay? Is there a motion to adjourn till November the 7th at 6
it's not
o'clock?
adjourn, it's not adjourn, it's continue the meeting until November 7th,
Good point. 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
That's your
Okay.
motion?
That's my motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Seeley, seconded by Mr. Thomas. Discussion on the motion. All in favor of saying aye?
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion's carried.